this week's and Haftorah, though this in a way too could be considered a New Year resolution, starting the new year as we mean to go on, making time for learning from our traditional texts. So let me share the main questions that occurred to me when I read these passages, and not all of them are easy to resolve. The first thing that struck me in the Torah portion was, what's wrong with sheep? In verse 22, Moses said to Pharaoh that the Israelites would be sacrificing an abomination, namely sheep. The sacrifice for the Sabbath, according to our second reading, was 2 he-lambs of the first year, with fine flour, cakes, and wine, and more for the new year, for the new moon and other festivals. Clearly, these were considered to be the finest foods, worthy of offering to God on special days. So why does Moses call them an abomination? Well, to the Egyptians, sheep apparently were just that. We might recall that when Joseph first invited his family to come and dwell in Egypt, he was concerned that they should not let the Egyptians know that they were shepherds. For every shepherd, it says in Genesis 46:34, every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Cattle were fine, but not sheep. Why? What's wrong with sheep? Mankind's relationship with sheep has been a long symbiosis. The good shepherd is the very model of virtue. Moses was looking after sheep when God first called him at Mount Horeb. In fact, one commentary suggests that it was his care as a shepherd that singled him out as worthy of the task. Modern commentators have suggested that the Egyptian attitude stemmed from the fact that the ram was sacred to them. Ram-headed sphinxes still flank the entrance to the temple of Amun at Thebes. Amun, the primordial hidden god, was also worshipped by Moses' time as the supreme deity, Amun-Ra. The creator god Khnum also had a ram's head. The ram represented fertility, and rams were used to trample the seed into the soil at planting time. Astronomically, and the stars were important to the Egyptians, the ram is the first zodiac sign to cross the horizon at the coming of spring. The earlier version of the Sonsino Chumash asserts that the Egyptians abominated sheep sacrifice because they were vegetarian, but I'm afraid since then a lot of archaeological evidence has suggested this was not the case. Either way, Moses uses the abomination argument to insist that the Israelites must be allowed right into the wilderness to perform their sacrifices. Otherwise, the Egyptians would set upon them, just as in India around the time of partition, Hindus set upon Muslims over the slaughter of cows. All this brings me to my second question. As you follow the conversation between Moses and Pharaoh, what stands out is the way in which Moses holds his ground. What can we learn from this? Pharaoh's in a dangerous mood, having just endured the invasion of his land by Arov, swarms of flies, or according to Ibn Ezra, wild beasts, or according to Rashi, serpents and scorpions. At any rate, something that swarms. Moses, as instructed, goes to confront him as he comes out to the water. And Pharaoh immediately offers him part of what he was asking for, permission to go and sacrifice. But he says, in the land, that is nearby. Moses stands up for his original terms of going 3 days' journey into the wilderness. And it is eventually granted, provided he prays for Pharaoh too, which he did. The swarming things ceased. It was not the end of the story, not the last plague. But what stood out for me was the courage needed by Moses to persevere through these unpleasant negotiations. What can we take from that? We may not immediately obtain what we see as right and needful, but we do need to continue in the pursuit, standing up to opposition and power where needed. And as Rabbi Ephraim Mervis wrote this week, drawing on this very parasha, we must never be complicit in tolerating the intolerable. My third question was why we have two portions today, and a haftarah that is not the one that naturally attaches to this portion of the Exodus story. That is easy to answer if it is Rosh Chodesh. We read the Rosh Chodesh haftarah, but there seems to be some dispute about whether it is Rosh Chodesh. Today's date, according to our booklet, is the 28th of Tevet, in a month that has 29 days. So the new moon of Shabbat may come in tomorrow night rather than today. So I can't answer this question, except to take pleasure in the fact that it is also the beginning of our secular new year, which, like Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, is a time for new beginnings. And as a progressive community, we would not be meeting again on Monday, if that's when it is, to celebrate that new moon, which raised the question of, is the new moon a tradition of former times that is waiting to be revived in greater significance? Or can we at least preserve it privately? It is, after all, good to notice the changing phases of the moon, as well as the cycles of the week and the passing of the seasons. The more we're in touch with the cycles of nature, the more likely we are to be aware of the earth and its need for our protection. That led to one further question. What is the relationship between Sabbaths and new moons? And here I found something startling and really interesting, though it needs further investigation. According to Professor Jacob Wright, there are several biblical references to your new moons and your Sabbaths. Note the order. Relying also on other Near Eastern traditions and linguistic clues, he uses this order to identify the Sabbath in its origins with the full moon. Otherwise, he says, the phrase should read, your Sabbaths and new moons, as the Sabbath is always considered to have priority. He believes that the name of Sabbath was connected to the seventh day as a day of rest only later. Giving rest on the seventh day to your workmen and cattle was already enjoined in several passages in Torah, but he proposes that it was only linked to the creation of the world in a later development or rewriting. And there is indeed a general consensus that we have two different accounts of creation in the first two chapters of Genesis. As we know it from Genesis 2, verses 1 to 3, which we recite weekly, God created the entire universe in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. But as my husband asked only recently, why did God need to rest after all that creating? Surely God does not get tired. The Sabbath is central to our observance of Judaism. Yet what if those opening chapters were not given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, but were added during or after the Babylonian exile, to join current practice and theology with the very beginnings of time? Enjoining rest on the seventh day has certainly been a great gift and one to be grateful for. Whether or not God had any need of rest, we certainly do. To conclude, or as the French would say, revenons à nos moutons, back to our sheep. We're enjoined in the reading from Numbers to sacrifice lambs on the Sabbath and presumably to feast on them too. But all the animal sacrifices ceased with the fall of the temple. And the reading from Isaiah confirms that they're not needed anyway. In our Haftarah, God said that if someone's heart is set in his own ways, he that sacrifices a lamb, it is as if he broke a dog's neck. That's a pretty disgusting thing to do. We know from our High Holy Day prayers and from this reading that God will look kindly upon him that is poor and of a contrite heart, and trembleth at my word, as we heard it today. God has no need of our sacrifice, or even of the temple. In Isaiah it says, "Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne and the earth my footstool. Where is the house that ye may build unto me? And where is the place that may be my resting place?" So perhaps this also ties in with the answer to Chris's question about rest and the Sabbath. Rosh Chodesh is also a day of rest and has been celebrated especially by women for millennia. So my resolve will be to pay more attention to the circuits of the moon and to find a way of marking each new moon as special. After all, it offers us even more opportunities for new beginnings. And as the Haftarah concluded, it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, saith the Lord. So Shabbat Shalom, and a very happy and healthy new month and new year to you all. Thomas, you're muted.
I said thank you very much, Valerie, for those wonderful words and wisdom. And you certainly sent a challenge to all of us. So I will look into some of the things that you mentioned. Actually, all of those things. Very, very exciting and very interesting.
I'll send you the links.
Thank you. Thank you.